All right, so now that we've seen what APIs are, it's time to learn how we can use it to grab live data from external sources and use it in our website. So we're going to be using the API that we saw in the last lesson in order to grab live Bitcoin and other cryptocurrency data. And we're going to make a website that allows users to check the latest prices of their cryptocurrencies. So first things first, let's set up our project. So inside desktop, I'm going to create a new directory that I'll call Bitcoin-ticker. And inside this directory, we're going to create two files. One is the index.js and the other one is the index.html. So now that we have two files inside our Bitcoin ticker, the next step is to initialize npm. And I'm going to go with just all the defaults and then I'm going to hit yes. So now we have our package.json. It's time to install some packages. So I'm going to use npm install and I'm going to install two packages at the same time. So that's going to be Express and body parser, which we always need. So as long as you have a single space between your package names, you can install as many as you want all in one go. So let's let that download and install. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to open up our project folder inside Atom, and inside the index.js I'm going to set up our website. So of course that includes requiring everything. So let's create our constant for Express, and that's going to be requiring Express. And then we're going to create our constant body parser, and that is of course going to be based on the body parser module that we installed just now. All right, and let's just add a comment up here for JS hint, and we are using ES version 6. All right. Now next I'm going to initialize our app. So I'm going to create a constant called app and it's going to be set to equal a new instance of Express. And then I'm going to make our app use body parser and I'm going to use the URL encoded option and set extended to true. So we're pretty much going to be doing this every single time we set up a new project. And you'll get used to writing this code over time. Now, if you don't want to, you can of course always copy and paste it. But as always with copy and pasting, you never know what you might forget to include or you might add. So I think especially in the beginning, good coding practice to just write it out yourself each time and try to remember everything that you need to do. So the next thing is I'm going to set up the app.listen so that our server can listen on port 3000. And once it is set up, we'll call the callback method and console log that server is running on port 3000. All right. So now that we've got all of that set up, all we need to do is specify our routes now. Now we want to render our index.html page. And so let's just set this boilerplate up and we'll call this Bitcoin ticker. Now inside the body, I'm going to have a form and the form is not going to have a class, but it is going to have an action targeting the home route. And we're going to keep the method as post. Now, ideally, what we want on our website are two drop-down lists so that the user can select the currencies that they want to convert from and to. So, for example, I want to convert from Bitcoins to US dollars, and I can get the current price for that conversion. So how do we do that? What if we didn't know how to do it? Well, we can always Google, right? So let's search for drop-down list HTML. And what do we get? We get the HTML select tag. So let's check out what it looks like. That's exactly what we wanted. And all we have to do is to include the select element and have a bunch of options for each of the drop-down items. So let's try and implement that in our code. So let's create a new select element, and it's not going to have a class, but it will have a name. So the first one is going to be called crypto. And this is where people will get to choose their cryptos, and it will have a bunch of options. Now, the first option is going to be Bitcoin, and the value is going to be BTC, which is short for Bitcoin. Now, we're going to include a couple more of these options to include Ethereum and Litecoins. All right, let's hit save and let's see if we can try and render our website as it is right now. So we're going to use app.get to target our home route, and we are going to have our callback function as always with request and our response. And the response from our server will be to send the file that is at our directory name plus index.html. So if this is at all confusing, make sure that you take a look at some of the previous lessons where we spoke about what all of these routes and requests and responses are all about, because we covered it in detail. So take a look back at some of those previous lessons if this is still confusing for you. All right, so let's try and give it a go. Let's go to our command line and let's say nodemon, and we're going to get it to run our index.js. So let's head over now to our localhost 3000, and you can see we have a drop-down menu with 3 items: Bitcoin, Ethereum, and Litecoins. All right, pretty cool. So now all we need to do is to finish off our website by adding in an H1 that says Bitcoin ticker. And then inside the form, I'm going to add another group of selectors, and these are going to be the fiat currencies. So your US dollars and your pounds and also your euros. And their shortcodes are USD, GBP, and EUR. All right, now let's take a look. If we refresh, we've got our title and we've got 2 new drop downs. The final thing we need to do is just to add a submit button. So it's going to be button of type submit, and it's going to have a name of check so that we can check what are the values of Bitcoins in US dollars or Ethereum in pounds. All right, so this is our basic website that's now set up. The next thing to do is we need to be able to get the data that the user chooses from these drop-down lists into our server. So as always, we're going to be using body parser. And so let's head into our index.js and let's create the post route. So of course, this again targets the home route, and we're going to add our callback function with our request and response. And inside that request that we get when something tries to post to our home route is going to be the contents of the selections. So if we go ahead and log the request.body, then we can tap into our select element. So let's first target our crypto. And let's hit save and see what we get. So let's choose Litecoin, and I'm going to click the submit button to trigger that post route so that we hit up the server through here and we make that request using our form. So now if we take a look inside our console, you can see we have LTC printed because that is the value of our third option, which is Litecoin. And this means that we can receive that data inside here and we'll be able to use it to send to the Bitcoin averages servers in order to get the relevant pieces of data that we want. All right, so now that we've confirmed that our website is set up and we're able to receive the options that the user selected, then the next step is to make the actual HTTP request to Bitcoin Average's servers and to get the data into our server. So our server now has to talk to an external server in order to get some data to populate our web page. So if we didn't know how to do this, as always, our good friend is google.com. So let's head over to google.com and say if we were completely clueless about how to do this, let's see if we can find an answer. So I'm looking to make an HTTP request to an external server, and let's see what we get. Okay, so the first result we get back is from Stack Overflow, and it's regarding Node.js. And it's already pretty close to what we need. How to make an external API call inside the Express server. This is pretty much spot on what we need. So let's take a look at the answers. The first answer says that you can contact any external server from a Node.js app with HTTP request. So that's one of the core modules that we looked at before. But it also says that you can use one of the higher level modules built on top of that, like the request module. So this is our answer. This is one of the most commonly used packages when people are creating Node apps that need to contact external servers or make HTTP requests. And you can see that it gets a whopping 12 million weekly downloads, and it's actively maintained. So you can see the last code update was only 2 days ago. So this is what we'll be using during the course. Because it's pretty much gold standard. It's pretty simple to use and allows us to do a lot of complex things without a lot of code. So let's go ahead and install this into our project. So let's quit our server and let's say npm install request is what it's called. And while that's installing, let's take a look at the example code in their documentation. So in order to use it, we have to require the package, and then we simply call request, passing in the URL that we want to make the request to, and then we get a callback function. The callback function has 3 parameters, so it can either send back an error if there was one, and a response from the other server that we're making the request to, and finally the body will contain the data that we need if we are making an API request. So let's try this out in our code. Now I'm going to go ahead and comment that out, and I'm going to go up to the top of my file and again create a new constant called request that requires the request package. So now that I have a request ready, I can make my request, and the first parameter is going to be the URL that we're going to make our request to, and the second parameter is going to be a callback function that has 3 parameters: error, response, and body. So let's call it that as well: error, response, and body. So those are the things that will be sent back to us once we make our request to this URL. So let's take a look at the Bitcoin Average API so that we can figure out what exactly it is that we need to request. So I'm here on the ticker data under the price data, tab. And you can see that this is the URL that the request needs to be made to. And the last part of the URL is a currency pair. So the first part is the cryptocurrency, and the second part is the fiat currency that you want. So you might notice that these symbols match up pretty perfectly with what we've got as our values in our drop-down menus. So we'll be able to combine these values on the fly and generate a URL in order to get the relevant data. But let's first test it out with the default option, which is converting from Bitcoins to USD. So I'm going to copy this URL and I'm going to paste it in here where the request method is expecting a URL. And then I'm going to simply log response that we get back. So now let's hit save and let's spin up our server once more. so that it's running on port 3000. And now let's head over to localhost 3000. And remember, at the moment, we're not taking into account what the user is selecting yet. We're just going to click the submit button so that we trigger this post route and we make this request to the already pre-specified URL, and we try to log the response that we get back. So let's press the submit button and let's take a look at what we got back. So you can see there's a lot of data that came back. Now, some of the interesting parts here are things like what was the href, or what was the URL that you tried to make the request to. And another really useful one is the status code that we get back from Bitcoin Average. Now, as you can see, this is pretty difficult to sift through. So let's instead just pick it out using code. So instead of printing out the entire response, let's print out response.status code. So let's hit save and let's try this again. Press the check button and check inside our console. You can see this time we're only getting a response code and not all of that information. So our response codes are really, really important. And previously, as we mentioned, anything that starts with a 2 means that it was successful. And if you're interested in checking out what the status code was, then take a look at hpstatuses.com, where it has a good English description of what everything means. So let's click on 200, and it says that means it's okay. The request has succeeded. That means that everything went well and we got a response back from Bitcoin Average's servers. So in order to see the data that we requested, then we have to tap into this body object. So now let's try and console log the body instead. So let's again refresh and press check. Now, if we take a look inside our console, what is logged is the data that we wanted. So all of this price related data, converting from Bitcoins to US dollars. Now, the format that the data comes back in is in the form of a JSON. So what exactly are JSONs? We've seen it previously a couple of times, but in the next lesson, we're going to explore in more detail what exactly JSONs are and how to use this data format in order to grab the pieces of data that we need and place it into our website. So for all of that and more, I'll see you on the next lesson.